Hello and welcome to the third of these talks on the Sacred Heart of Jesus. In this one, I want to consider how we're called to be priests of the Sacred Heart. One of the important purposes of the priesthood, of course, is to share with others something of the love of God, to help them consider that love and to grow in their free gift of themselves to that love. To do that, we need to be growing in that love. In his Gospel, St. John records, of course, that triple question Jesus asked Peter: "Do you love me? Love me more than these?" He wasn't speaking of sentimental love, but agape love, love which is costly. He wanted to get Peter to consider in depth, the depth of his heart, that love which is the image of the Sacred Heart. It's this love which needs to animate the vocation of every priest. And we need to hear Jesus saying to us, "Do you love me more than these?" It's the question that needs to refresh our vocation and to which we need to constantly return. It's the question reflected by the image of the Sacred Heart, and is one of the reasons why it can be of great benefit to everyone, not least the priest. We all know the importance of images, how they can speak more powerfully than words. And as we know, the image of the heart speaks across religions, cultures, and ages, whether the heart on a Valentine's card or one made with our hands. It has a warm, sentimental feel, which is the difference between those romantic hearts and the Sacred Heart. For the Sacred Heart portrays the cost of Jesus' love, shown in the way this heart is illustrated with symbols of the Passion. You can see a copy of it to my left. It's a copy of one attributed to St. Margaret Mary Alaquoque, which she drew in about 1675 in pen and ink. So let's consider them, for they reveal the depths of Christ's love, a love which is of far greater importance than the fuzzy glow that can come with a Valentine. Firstly, it is a heart pumping with blood, the one organ which enables the whole body to live. Unseen, but not unheard, it works away 24/7 for the whole of our time on earth. We could manage without many of our body organs, but not without our heart. And it's that unseen beat of the heart which needs to animate our vocation. Then there's that matter of the blood which is shown, dripping from a wound. That makes it clear how the heart of Jesus, like that of his mother, was pierced. Hers by a sword, his by a lance, the Holy Lance, as he hung on the cross. The lance pierced through his side into his heart, into what this drawing by St. Margaret Mary made clear was a reservoir of caritas, love, from which flowed blood and water, the water of baptism and the blood of the Eucharist, sacraments of the love of God. In the past, the sacred blood was revealed for the way it was that ocean of love, which could cleanse and renew our own. Wash thou my wounds in that dear blood which forth from thee doth flow. Grace, new hope inspire, a new and better heart bestow. It's recorded that Jesus said about the German mystic, St. Gertrude, the proximity of her heart to the wound in my side means that I have so joined her heart to mine that she is able to receive directly and at all times the flow of my divinity. So we're also to be priests of the wounded Christ, realizing that it's the wounds of those with whom we minister that are reflected by the wounded heart of Jesus. To underline the connection between the Sacred Heart and the Passion of Christ, the heart is enclosed by a crown of thorns. Firstly, that reminds us how it wasn't just his body which reveals the cost of love. His mind also paid the price. But just as the holy lance which pierced his side of Jesus symbolizes those darts of longing love which gain us entry into Christ's heart, so we can meditate on the way this crown of love pierces him. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but humbled himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. It also reminds us that whilst we may not find ourselves having to physically suffer for our faith, there will be many times when we're pierced and humbled, and all we can do is hold on to our consecration as priests of the Sacred Heart. No wonder then that the heart is surmounted by the cross, or perhaps we might consider how the cross rests on the Sacred Heart, reminding us that when we gaze on it, we must always contemplate it as the sign of God's love. Priestly ministry will always be under this sign of our Master, and reminding us that we should never be surprised that we're called to suffer with him. Teresa of Avila said, the important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and do that which stirs us to love. How often do we place our mind in that heart, where the center of our being rests? Again, that consideration is informed by the way the cross is inflamed, the fire of God's love by which so many have said we must be consumed. The power of your love, prayed St. Francis of Assisi, fiery and sweet as honey, so absorb our hearts as to withdraw them from all that is under heaven. Grant that we may be ready to die for love of your love, as you died for love of our love. That prayer should take us back to that triple question posed to St. Peter, a prayer which might be one every priest prayed daily. The Sacred Heart is a warm, glowing heart, radiating compassionate love, a hurt, open heart, which is the gate of heaven and needs to inform our priesthood. But then there's that aspect of some images of the Sacred Heart which many find off-putting. The way they show Jesus in an androgynous way. He seems partly male and partly female, certainly not a man's man. There's a femininity about many images which can be challenging, but which fits with the classic symbolism of the heart as feminine and the mind as masculine. The softness and approachability of Jesus in such images is revealed by artists who, perhaps unconsciously, knew the Sacred Heart was meant to open us to the feminine in the divine, and is meant to answer that false dualism pictures can inevitably portray. For we know that in Christ there is neither male nor female. We are all one in him. Something we need to realize in ourselves. Our priesthood needs to incarnate both the feminine and masculine in God. Finally, I want to acknowledge that the Sacred Heart is not only a universal symbol, it's also a symbol of the universe. We know, wrote St. Paul, that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And we can rightly believe that at the heart of the universe is the heart of Christ, the Creator. Within this cosmic Christ is a cosmic intimacy. The Creator we proclaim isn't some majestic deus ex machina, but a power of love, a love whose nature is constantly creative. The universe is like woman struggling in giving birth to an infant conceived in love. One of the reasons why devotion to the Sacred Heart is important is that it declares that we are made in that image. And if you want to understand what this human being is all about, look at the Sacred Heart. As Teilhard de Chardin wrote in The Heart of the Matter, this devotion gave him a sense of the solidity of Christ, the immersion of the divine in the corporal, a glowing core of fire able to insinuate itself everywhere, to make love of the cosmic milieu. Such a realization lies behind Eucharistic living, living with a constant realization of the loving, compassionate presence of God in all things. As priests, we are not only those who preside at the sacraments, we need to enable others to live sacramentally as we deepen our own awareness of God's loving presence in all things. So as we come now to the end of this meditation, let's keep a few moments of silence, at the end of which I'll read a reflection by the late Mother Osith of Morling Abbey. Wind, fire, and flame, the outward sign, but in the heart, breath of the Spirit, love and light, heavenly dew of sanctifying grace, God's very presence, hallowing the place, restoring to his image the soul's face.